Hi, good morning, everyone. We are so glad to have you here with us today. I'm Melissa Mullen with Beck Technology. This morning, we're going to be jumping into a panel discussion of a couple of different topics, including collaboration between pre-con teams and operations, as well as how to keep encouraging and managing this collaboration in a time when a lot of our teams are partially or fully remote. I just want to encourage those of you in the audience to ask questions as they come up. We may not be able to get to them during the webinar, but we are more than happy to follow up afterwards. So that being said, enough of me talking. I just want to jump into introductions. Jan, if you could get us kicked off, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm Jan Barron. I'm a lead estimator for Beckenhauer Construction. We're a team of about 35 folks here in Nebraska.
All right, and then Andy.
All right, can you guys hear me okay? It says muted on my side.
Yeah, you're good.
All right, so I'm Andy Onan. I'm with Sebastian Construction Group here in Dallas, Texas, and I'm a pre-construction manager. We're a company of about 60.
Awesome, and then Landon.
Good morning. My name is Landon McQuestion. I'm the director of pre-construction and estimating for Balfour Beatty for the California division. Pretty big division. We have about 85 active projects here. Do about 750 million a year.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for being here with us today. I know that this is a significant time out of y'all's day, and we really appreciate it. And so with that being said, I'd like to really just jump right into the discussion. I want to start off by asking each of you to just kind of quickly describe which departments in your company are involved with developing, reviewing, and presenting estimates. And Landon, if you could kick that off, and then we'll go to to Andy and Jan.
Sure. Here at Balfour Beatty, pretty much all the estimating is done by the pre-construction department, the estimating department. We have quite a few estimators, so we handle 100% of the estimating. We do collaborate a lot with the field teams, and we do a lot of different delivery methods. So certain delivery methods that happen, the collaboration happens more, say a design build. We do a lot of large design builds. So on those, a superintendent and like a senior PM or a PX gets involved really early, and they have the estimating software on their computer. They're usually active in the estimate. They're asking questions. They're making notes. Some of the other delivery methods in our area, like the CM multi-prime, CM at risk, those are slightly less there, where our department actually builds the estimate and then sends it to them, and they'll review it, but they don't actually have the software on their computer. So it all just depends on the delivery method.
Okay, and then Andy, do you want to tell us about how you guys handle that?
Sure. So we have three departments within our company that really just kind of follow the life cycle of the project. So pre-construction, operations, and then our post-construction group we call client services, that do warranty work and small projects. And our pre-construction group is made up of 3 estimators and 3 pre-con managers, and also the president of our company, obviously kind of a sales role associated with pre-con. So that's a part of what his role is, introducing the clients, bringing them in. In terms of collaboration, we have quite a bit of review process that goes on with operations, where any of our estimates that are going to contract, we have a formal review that we do with our operations team that will be taking over the project. And then we have really some informal processes that we do for constructability issues, where essentially we'll go to either like a general superintendent or different project managers, depending on what some of the issues are, to bring them in and help resolve issues before they're real issues in the field. So I think that's kind of high level for us.
Okay, awesome. And then Jan.
Yeah, for our group, our pre-construction team kind of slowly hands the project off to the field and ops groups. And so early on, we do a lot of CM and design build work. And so we're starting off in the conceptual or schematic phase and then continuing on through construction. the earlier in the process is, the more of it is on our pre-construction team's shoulders to do the heavy lifting as well as the review and sharing those estimates either at milestones or in between. The closer and closer we get to actually buying the job out and breaking ground, the more involved the project manager and the superintendent, project executives are going to get, so that we can kind of make that transition happen in a way that gets the field's buy-in. For the most part, most of the work is being done by the pre-con team.
Okay, awesome. So it sounds like from a lot of what you guys are saying, there is definitely an established relationship between pre-con and operations. So some of you did talk about processes. For those of you that didn't bring that up as much, do you have a standard process in place to collaborate with operations staff? And if you do, are you receiving good participation from ops staff? And if any one of you can just jump in and go for that.
Sure.
I can start us off. As a smaller group, we probably take for granted that a lot of the standard operating procedures happen just by virtue of us being smaller. We're learning now that we're working remotely that a lot of that collaboration was happening kind of ad hoc, you know, going next door to the PM's office, having a conversation, that sort of thing, and we're having to be more intentional about it. So this time has been really interesting for us to kind of step back and take a look at, you know, how are we getting that input, and do we need to formalize it as we continue to grow and expand?
Awesome. And then Landon, I feel like.
Yeah, we have a pretty formal system here. How it works is a VP or a PX who's chasing a project submits a estimate request form. That becomes our estimate management system, where how we manage all of our tasks between the estimators and the pre-con personnel within the department. And then that card also moves on and becomes the management piece during pre-con. So that gets shared with the superintendent involved on the project or the pursuit, the senior project manager involved. So it actually has tasks and roles for each person within it. So we have a pretty defined system. So like when it goes out, the superintendent knows that he needs to review the general requirements in the estimate, and he knows that he needs to look at, you know, say the SWIP requirements and make sure we have enough money in there for temp fences and whatever else affects the superintendent highly. And then the PM, he's got a checkbox system that he knows what he needs to look for in the estimate. And when we go to review, those things get checked that we're sure that those people looked at what they need to look at.
I'd say for us, the process is pretty formal, but maybe a little less collaborative. We take on a vast majority of our checks in pre-con directly, and basically do more of a review process with our operations staff. I think that's true for, you know, at least the half of our work that's pre-commencement. You know, once a project starts construction, the pre-con role continues for phases that, you know, maybe we have an interior package that comes in after the project starts, and from that standpoint, those are much more collaborative because there is a PM, there is a superintendent, the project is rolling, and so we have you know, an established group that we can go to get their feedback. But early on, if I'm doing a conceptual budget or even a shell budget that's for a project that's about to start construction, maybe in 30 days, we may not know yet who that team is going to be. So I've got resources within our operations staff that I can go to with questions, but until we have a commencement date and a transition meeting, it's still a little bit fluid on who, you know, even who the superintendent is. You know, we may have a guy kind of earmarked that we think, you know, this person may, you know, line up that we think they're going to be the person, but until it happens, it's pretty fluid.
Yeah, you know, Jen touched on this a little bit, and he mentioned that working remote has kind of brought up some areas where his team realizes, hey, we need collaboration. transitioning to either partially or maybe in some cases fully remote teams, have you guys, Andy and Landon, have either of y'all noticed areas where you want to bring more collaboration? Have you thought of processes already that you think could solve maybe some of those areas that are lacking? And Landon, that off.
Sure. We have been fully remote. Some of us are back in the office now, but we did go fully remote for a couple months. We didn't really see too much of a change, honestly. We didn't really see a drop in collaboration. Maybe it took a couple days for everybody to really get in the cycle of, okay, we use Teams meetings. Everybody get in the cycle of using the Teams tool a lot. For us, we didn't really, we just didn't see much of an effect. Everybody was already kind of remote when it comes to the field versus the office. We have really big job site offices, so the superintendents, the PMs, they were already out remote from us, the pre-con department. So we were already used to collaborating with them remotely. So we didn't really feel an impact, honestly.
Gotcha. Andy, what about on your side?
Yeah, pretty similar. I mean, I think, just purely in collaboration, I'd say there's maybe a little bit less. It's maybe a little easier to pop your head up over the cubicle and interrupt your cubicle neighbor than it is to do an instant message on Teams or so I think there's probably a little bit less collaboration that's going on, or just communication in general. But I think it's also been healthy too. Sometimes those interruptions can be pretty disruptive. So just keeping it to maybe people saving things for doing more communication at once, as opposed to spread out bits throughout the day that just kind of keep you from really getting on a flow with your work day. But yeah, we've really benefited by just having the technologies that we were already using and getting probably more out of it. We use some task management software, Microsoft To Do, that's got some really good collaboration tools built in, where you can set up a group of to-dos, assign them out within a team, and manage all the dates and get reminders and kind of track where people are on their assigned to-dos. And so we've been utilizing that. Probably the hardest thing with collaboration online for me anyway is just reviewing plans. I'm still kind of a paper guy when it comes to looking at plans. I like to flip through a printed set of plans and being able to sit with a full-size set with another human and actually look at them together and point at things and draw on the plans. And it's not quite as good trying to do that in a virtual environment. It's a little bit clunky. I'm a big Bluebeam user, and maybe I have a few more tricks to learn to really get good at that. But when you've got a large plan set, 400 or 500 pages, and you're trying to flip through and have a working conversation with somebody, that can be a little clunky.
Yeah, I can imagine. Jan, do you have any thoughts to add on to that? For example, maybe your company is already taking steps to kind of address those areas where y'all do need more collaboration, such as bringing on more tools or different processes or things like that.
Yeah, so we've been working a little bit more intently to have project managers participate in the bid and buyout stage of the project. We're working on coming up with ways to assign different disciplines to different roles, because we're a smaller company. We've got a fairly small pre-con team, and what we're finding is that although a lot of projects kind of went on pause for a couple of months during this quarantine period, everything's coming back in a flurry now, and everybody wants to get things done. So our little 3.5, 4-man team is fairly overwhelmed at times, and so we're working on implementing changes that bring the field staff into support earlier on in that handoff period on projects. we haven't quite pinned down how we're going to manage that. It's gonna have to have some sort of digital platform, because even when we return to the office 100%, we're spread out over the state, and so we are looking to into ways we can utilize Teams, using that planner feature and setting up whether it's group chats or actual formal teams with planner tabs and all that stuff to help keep track and assign tasks. A lot like what I think Landon and Andy were speaking to, but we are still kind of working through how that actually is going to look and feel for our group. With as customizable as those features are on our computers, the defined path isn't always there to just say, okay, we're going to start and this is how it's going to look. Kind of have to feel it out to see how it fits.
Yeah, absolutely. So, the next question that we're going to tackle, we've got another question here from the audience that meshes really well with that. So the question from the audience member was, how do each of you ensure at your companies that there's a feedback loop between pre-construction and operations? It sounds like Balfour has a really good system in place, but does it smooth out receiving and giving feedback as a project moves forward? And tying in with that, do you at your company, is there any rotation of personnel between ops and pre-construction that maybe helps ensure this feedback loop? And Landon, if you could kick that off for us.
Sure. I'll start with the end there. We don't have a system for bringing people from the field into Precon. Precon's kind of standalone department spread across California. I think that when I was hearing Jan speak, that's one of the things that I think made the transition to working remotely so fluid for us. Was we're already spread out. We have most of our estimators are in San Diego, but we have some in Orange County, some in Riverside, some in San Francisco. But we don't have a system for bringing in PMs or anybody else into the Precon department. But when it comes to feedback from the field, it's on us. It's on the Precon personnel. The fields, they're so focused on getting the project done on time and on budget that you have to hound them for feedback. We have systems for it. A lot of times they just get busy and it gets ignored. So a lot of times for me, it's picking up the phone. It's hounding the PM, it's hounding the PX, finding out, how it really worked out, what we missed, what we can learn from that estimate or that bid. So for us, it's really on us as Precon personnel.
Gotcha. We'll take it to Andy and then we'll wrap up with Jan.
Yeah, in terms of formal cross training between ops and Precon or Precon to ops, we don't have a process in place for that, except for by necessity. So when we have maybe somebody that's coming off of a project and we don't have a new project for them to go, then they may rotate through Precon for a period of time, and then vice versa. If we have a project starting and we're light in Precon, we may have a Precon manager go be a PM, but it's generally speaking an interim basis. And not something that we really have a formalized process for. In terms of, remind me, what was the second part of that question, Melissa?
The second part of that question was regarding the feedback loop. So how do you ensure that there's that feedback between ops and Precon at your company?
So we have the main one that we do is budget review. But there are some other pieces that we have done, but I really need to make more consistent. So one is just subcontractor performance feedback. So we use a bidding software that we keep track of pre-qualification information, bidding history, things like that. And we have done in the past several times a year surveys to our superintendents and project managers to get feedback on how our subs are performing. And we also get kind of unsolicited feedback, of course, on the ones that are not doing well. I always hear about those, but we want to hear from the guys that are, also doing extremely well and providing better value, or just kind of getting a better sense of who's giving us more change orders than we think is fair. If they're doing that consistently, we want to know about that. So we've been doing that through surveys, but I'd like to try and get a more just a regular way of getting that feedback into our process. And I'd love to know if either of you guys have found a good way to do that, consistently, where that's something that's always updated. So when you're, looking at who you're going to invite to bid or making selections, that you're seeing, more relevant feedback to their performance.
Yeah, I think here at Beckenhauer, it's we see a lot of the same issues that Andy and Landon are seeing. Our production staff, they're focused on production, getting that job done. So the onus to get that feedback is really on us as the pre-construction team, because if we don't get that feedback and somehow work it into the projects that we have coming up, we're going to hear about it when things start going south, or we commit to a sub that a project manager is like deathly afraid of. And so keeping in touch with a project manager and a superintendent on projects that we have in production, I try to touch on a monthly basis with those PMs and soups, just to kind of review how things are going, because some of our projects are going to be 18, 24, 30 months or longer with some of the work that we do. And so a lot changes from the time that we prepare our final estimate to the time the project is over and done with. And a lot has gone on. So to sit down at the very end of that project and say, okay, hit me with everything that went right and everything that went wrong is really, that's an unattainable goal. And so to try and break that up into monthly chunks, and you can have a half hour to an hour conversation with your project leads to find out what subs are performing well, which ones aren't, what building systems are working, which ones do we need to try and steer future projects away from. You get better feedback when it's more frequent because they don't have to think of like a life in review. Life doesn't flash before their eyes. It's what are you dealing with right now that's good and bad that we can incorporate into our pre-construction process going forward. And to answer Andy's question, we've tried a number of systems, a number of ways, regular surveys and things like that, and we've got a good pre-qualification and bid letting software system in place already, but it all comes down to a human maintaining those systems, pushing that as a priority to make sure that we've got consistent and regular feedback. And I think one of the biggest challenges is we talk about subcontractors and vendors as individual entities, but really in many cases it can come down to the foreman on the job for that crew. And so where a foreman for this one subcontractor might be grossly underperforming on one project, we've got another project over here where the project manager is willing to trust his firstborn son with that foreman. So I mean, it's almost, I think that's one of the bigger challenges is you get, in order to get good information, you almost need to know who's on the job, not just the company, but the people. But if you can identify that because you're having frequent touches, you can then contact the higher up, if it's a project manager or superintendent for that subcontractor or the company's owner, to say, hey, look, we really like you guys on this job. We're really struggling with you guys on that job, and start to have that conversation that way. But you don't know unless you have those conversations on a regular basis.
Yeah, Landon, do you have anything to add to that as far as trying to address that challenge?
Yeah, so it's funny, we just this year rolled out a new system for evaluating subcontractors, and I tried to make it as simple as possible for the field teams. So what we did was a smart sheet web form. So they just fill out this web form. It's really simple. It's mostly drop downs. They type in the company's name. The drop downs say what scope they do, and then they kind of rate how they're doing. That's got a notes section. So it's really, really simple. That goes into a smart sheet that we manage on the pre-con side, and we get feedback from just about every project on how their subcontractors are doing, because we made it really fast and easy for them. So then we're able to inform our bid invite software on who's doing well, who's not.
Landon, just curious, are you guys asking for people to fill those out regularly, or is it just kind of come in as they, you know, have issues or want to kind of give kudos?
So it's, when I sent it out originally, I didn't get a lot of feedback from it. I maybe got 10 PMs go in there and fill out some of their favorite subs. Then I sent it over to our VP of operations for the division and said, hey, you need to blast this out to your PMs and you need to have them fill this out. And so he does that pretty regularly now, and we get great feedback. It's who it came from. You know, it came from their boss, and so they filled it out.
Yeah.
That's incredible. You know, Jan, you're a big thinker. You've got a lot of ideas. So kind of, I mean, land and system, that sounds amazing. That sounds like a pretty good solution to that challenge. Is there any like software that you could think of that would help your team with that, or maybe one that's not on the market but you'd like to see?
I think there are a lot of tools that could add into a lot of the ideas would be to develop a tool similar to what Landon's idea is, to have some sort of subcontractor survey to send out to your superintendents and PMs that would tie into some of the existing bid management platforms already. Because one of the glitches, and you know, it's just by virtue of necessity. Landon said that after the survey is completed, the estimators or the pre-con team is then responsible with making sure that feedback gets included in the subcontractor database, working into their bid letting systems. And so to close that gap of having somebody develop a tool that can either plug in as a third-party provider to the more popular bid management platforms, or the bid management platforms just deciding that they're going to build these little app plugins that we can force our subcontractors and PMs through their supervisors, right? Complete on a regular basis would really help, because a lot of times the Precon team, at least in my experience in the companies that I've worked for, most of the feedback you get, if there's not a formal system in place that's regularly maintained, is the negative feedback. Oh, this guy's awful. Never use this guy again. You never hear about these guys made it on time, on budget on this job, and you didn't have any hitches or glitches. And really, the ones that don't create the wakes are the ones that you want to hear about, because those are the ones that you want to leverage until they're overloaded and you have to find somebody else.
It's really funny that you say that. When I sent it out from my email, just about every response I got was, hey, this is great, but where's the blacklist? Because we wanted to know who the good ones were, and all the PMs were responding with, where's our list for the bad ones?
Yeah, the problem is if you blacklisted somebody because one of your supers or PMs said they were no good, you'd have nobody left, because
we'd have
everybody's got their favorite and everybody's got their guy that we should never use again. And a lot of those companies are the same companies, just with different people internally.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. The personality matchup of the superintendents and the subcontractors, foremen, or supers. You know, sometimes oil and vinegar just don't mix, and if you make a bunch of company-wide decisions on that lack of reaction, you're just gonna dilute your pool.
Yeah, and kind of tacking onto that, Jan, you know, speaking of personalities within companies and keeping consistency throughout the process, do you guys, like, what do you guys do at your companies to help ensure continuity for the client, you know, as the project transitions from pre-con to ops? And additionally, is there a face of your company that's consistent all the way through? And I'll let y'all decide which one you want to kick off with that.
Yeah, so as far as the face of the company, generally, you know, we have somebody that's responsible for the relationship overall, whether that's the business development officer or the, you know, some of our VP level and ups have a lot of those relationships, and they'll maintain contact throughout the project. It might not be an active role, but for us, we've found that having a pre-construction, whether it's lead estimator, pre-construction director, manager, carry the ball during the pre-construction phase and slowly hand off to the project manager. as we enter the field construction, and then the pre-con guy kind of fades away and works in the background to support the PM. That's how we've tended to operate. I think it's a little bit different for Balfour Beatty and possibly even Andy, and so I'd be interested to hear their approach to the face of the company issue.
Yeah, for us, I think it's an area that we could probably improve. I think that there is a bit of a cold handoff today, and Precon kind of owns the project. We manage the process for sometimes a period of years before the project actually starts construction, and for that reason, we don't have an operations person assigned to it. They're off doing real projects, and we may do conceptual budget after conceptual budget on all sorts of different concepts, and then hopefully it makes its way through the design process to begin construction. And once that occurs, we have a transition meeting and hand off the lead on that job to the PM from the project manager or from the pre-con manager. And there are the continuity there is with a project director and or the president of the company. So they do have a common executive level person that they're dealing with all the way through, but the person that's kind of the doer that's in the weeds does transition from pre-con manager to the project manager. And for some of our clients, their main point of contact may be the superintendent. Some of our clients are more, they want to be out there in the field with our project staff, and so we don't force that. We kind of let that be a natural fit, whoever they kind of click with and how they want to interact with us. But it is a bit of a cold transition there that is something that we've looked at. Should we bring that potential future project manager in earlier to have that transition be a little warmer? But the challenge is, of course, not knowing when that start date is, or have it, if that person is involved and then ends up not being their project due to the timing of that job and other projects. So it's a tough one for us to really figure out how to do.
For us, it's pretty different. We have the PX VP level each have their own clients. About 80% of our projects here in the California division are repeat clients. So the VP level, PX level, they track along with our business acquisition department are tracking projects years in advance, and they're in front of the client the entire time. The PX is. And then they transition into actually running the project. So here, pre-con doesn't play a very big role with selling the project. Of course, we come into the interviews. We help with the RFP responses when it comes to how we're going to address pre-con. But our PX VP business development, they are so early in the projects, and they keep the same face in front of the client for, we have like Chula Vista Elementary School District. We've had the same PX working with that client for 32 years now. So we just, they stay implanted with the same client, and it seems to work really well for us.
Andy, do you have any thoughts onto how you guys could address that consistency maybe better in your team? Or have you seen any other companies that you really like how they handle that? Could you talk a little to that?
Well, from just in my experience in the commercial construction industry, there's a lot of firms that do rotate their PMs into a pre-con role when they finish a project, and seen that be very successful for a lot of companies. I guess the negative on that is just specialization in pre-con. Some of the tools that we use, some of the takeoff software, to really get good at that part of the business, I think having that specialization is a big benefit. And then at the same time, I think managing a superintendent and the role of a project manager, it's a little different, and some of the core strengths of the person in that role may not be the same person that excels in one role and the other. Sometimes you may find that just your culture index profile is going to be a little more suited for one other, over the other. And so for us, we have looked at that rotational possibility. The continuity part of it for us is the biggest appeal, but the timing of projects is really tough on that, and then just some of the specialization that I mentioned.
Gotcha. And Jen, kind of to Elenon's point, they have someone right to a project that's been there for years. They're very, very familiar with the owner. Do you think maybe that's more a case of size? Do you think that it's maybe better for Beckenhauer to do it the way you're doing it right now because you're a bit of a smaller contractor?
Yeah, I would say that how it's been done, it has been, that relationship, because we do have our president, CEO, and a couple other folks that have been around with the company for a long time. I mean, it's a 5-generation company that have relationships with clients that have spanned decades as well, but they're not necessarily the ones in the kind of, to borrow a phrase Andy mentioned, like in the weeds on the project. And so we do generally have a consistent face for the company from a relationship standpoint, but from like the meat of the project standpoint, we have to balance the relationship with manpower allocations with our smaller pool of human resources.
Gotcha. Thank you for that, Jen. That was a great answer. I'm going to make a bit of an abrupt transition just because we're getting close on time. There's 2 more questions I really want to get to. So one of the questions that we have here is, can you describe how paying for precon occurs in your market while the project is under construction? So for example, budgeting, interior packages, change orders, that kind of thing. And kind of the second part of that question is that usually a separate fee? Does it roll into a general conditions, or is it just not paid by the client after commencement and it just comes out of profit? And Andy, if you could kick us off on that.
Sure. So getting paid for precon has been sort of a new concept for us, and it's not something that I've seen from competitors in our space, and we build a product type that's high-end residential estate type houses, and so I haven't seen that amongst companies that we run up against. Once the project commences construction, we really haven't ever billed for estimating time, but that is something that we are looking to start capturing, at least recovering like hourly costs, particularly where we have jobs that have redesign or design delays where the anticipated amount of work is being busted. There's more estimating work that's having to be done than what should have been done or what was anticipated and budgeted for originally. In terms of pre-commencement, that is something that we have been doing for the past year and a half, 2 years, and it's very similar, having basically an hourly pre-construction. It's really not a fee, it's just a billing for our cost on projects. And it's particularly where we're doing the pre-construction services that are over and above just estimating. If we're helping manage on-site work, maybe building a mock-up, helping with demo, helping with building permitting, things that we would do that are tangible services that are not just what's the project going to cost and how long is it going to take to build. Those are still kind of our standard things that we don't charge for our time on, but those sort of premium services we do.
Okay, and then Jan, we'll take it to you.
Yeah, so we do try to budget in a little bit of the pre-construction department's time for post-shovel activities, whether it's as-built estimating or if there is an additional package that is yet to be let out. We try and keep that as a bucket of money, both declared to the project team to say, hey, we're not done with our work yet, and so this cost is here for that purpose, and also to try and recoup some of the pre-construction fees in our neck of the woods. Paying for pre-con is a fairly new concept. I think for a long time, general contractors were either really really fast and free with square foot costs and even detailed estimates. But as we've gotten busier and owners are actually expecting more from those estimates and pre-construction services, I think they're that we're, as an industry in this area, starting to realize that we need to start charging for this, or else we're not going to be competitive trying to make it up on the back end. With change orders and things like that, though, that's normally managed and handled by the project manager to an extent. Basically, our rule of thumb is if the change is significant enough that it could be its own project, that's when you probably want to talk to pre-construction and get some help there. But for the most part, if it's small things here and there, or you open up a wall and there's all kinds of stuff that nobody anticipated on a renovation, that's generally handled by the PM, and we're just there as a supporting role to make sure that scopes stay in line with what we had planned on in pre-con.
Awesome. And then Landon?
In our division here, pre-con's pretty much all paid for because we do all public works. It's that they know it's part of our general conditions, and we have it accounted for throughout the project for changes and anything else that can happen.
Awesome. Well, we have talked a lot about some really interesting trends and changes and new standards within pre-construction. And so kind of to wrap that all up, if you had a magic ball, that you could look into and see the future, what would your predictions be for the rest of 2020 for construction, or even for pre-construction specifically? And Landon, we'll kick that off with you.
Well, in our market, what we're seeing is a lot more people going after the same projects we are, so we're going to have to get more competitive. Here in California, we've had a big, the last couple of years have been really booming on the private side, and that kind of just all stopped all of a sudden with the virus. So us being on the public works side, we're seeing a lot more competition starting to look at the projects we're looking at. So for us, it's how do we stay as competitive as possible, and how do we keep on these projects?
Absolutely. And then Andy?
I don't know if this is a real future crystal ball projection here, but we're seeing a number of our clients that they're seeing that cash is king, and if they've got a real project that's moving forward, that they want to take a few extra steps to make sure that they're getting the best for their money. And so we're seeing a lot of rebidding of things that were kind of already solidified, that they want to kind of tap the brakes and let's go back and hit the market again and see if due to just the environment we're in, if commodity pricing, fuel costs have come down, if those are going to benefit them. And we're pretty early in that. I think we've seen some benefits, maybe 3% or less, in the ones that we've done over the last just really like a month. But I think in our business, the subcontractors are probably by and large not big projection companies. We deal with a lot of small craftsmen. They're very good at their craft, but they're not necessarily good at managing the long term of their business. And I think unfortunately they will we'll get that feedback when this slowdown catches up with them in probably 6 months. There's a lag time there and so I think for our clients that want to maybe wait or rebid interiors and things after it's underway. There's a bit of a gamble there, but anyway, that's, I think, one of the big trends we're seeing is this kind of rebidding to kind of take advantage of some of the potential savings that's out there. And other than that, I just hope everybody stays safe and practices social distancing and wears these uncomfortable masks, even though it's 100 degrees here in Dallas.
Oh, absolutely. And then Jan.
I think a lot of my crystal ball looking into the future has to hinge on how much longer this quarantine environment is going to last across the country. So that you're going to see regional shifts. But since everybody went into quarantine, a lot of projects kind of got either intentionally sideburnered or they just took longer to get out the door by virtue of everybody working remotely and all the adjustments that had to be made to processes and things like that initially. Right now in our region here in Nebraska, we're seeing a lot of projects that were supposed to come off the bid, early spring for ground breaks at the beginning of the building season. They're just now hitting the markets now. So subcontractors and general contractors are in a flurry of bidding activity for the next 2 to 3 weeks on some fairly substantial projects. I think that's going to be a good thing to kind of help buffer some of the economic impacts of what's about to come. But we really are going to see a dynamic shift in how people interact in society, at least for the next 5 to 10 years. And the longer this lasts, the longer the quarantine lasts, the longer that impact is going to have. It could be a generational thing. And so it's going to change how we view, do we really need to build a $20 million office for our company, or can we scale that down to 5 million and have a strong work from home policy? And that really starts to affect our industry as far as what's coming online, what to plan for. I think you're going to see a large shift in the marketplace away from your more traditional multifamily units where apartments are, studio, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom. I think you're going to see a lot of apartment complexes being designed with some sort of like work-life balance amenities to them. And I think we're going to see kind of a pullback in large commercial development for officing and things like that. But I know just from being a part of the industrial industry that the food supply chain, there's going to be a lot of work coming up in the food supply chain, either in adding to existing capacity or changing how existing facilities are managed and run to ensure that workers in like a meatpacking plant can remain a little bit more distance in order to plan for future pandemics and be ready for them, because we were really, as a society, caught with our pants down this last time around. And so you're going to see a lot of changes in that regard. You're going to see pullback in some more conventional construction industries, but you're going to see a lot more dollars being put into some more critical infrastructure type of things for our society.
Love these answers. I think all of them hit the nail on the head. Our current environment has completely changed just everything about how we work, about how we interact with each other. And to Jan's point, that is going to have a ripple effect for a really long time. And we can't fully predict that right now, but I love hearing about your thoughts and what you're seeing as even now as you move into the future. With that being said, we are running up on time. Did anyone have any other closing thoughts they'd like to share before I wrap it up? Awesome. That's great. Great. No, that's awesome.
Enjoyed the conversation, guys, and hearing what everybody's doing.
Yep.
For sure. To those of you online, thank you again for joining us. This was a really amazing conversation, and hopefully it brought a lot of benefit and insight to you. Remember, you can reach out to us if you have any other questions that you would like to talk about. You can reach me at Melissa Mullen at beck-technology.com. And keep in mind that we will have a webinar next week on Wednesday. I believe that is the at 10 a.m. CST. So be sure to join us for that. Thank you guys again for being on here today and having this conversation. It was a really great talk, and we look forward to talking to you next time.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Have a good day.